So I'm first going to go over how genocide as a whole is gendered, just to give some context and background so that we can go into the Uyghur situation and understand how that works there. One of the main points of the Genocide Convention was to define genocide so that future generations wouldn't sit around wasting time trying to define what is and what is not genocide while it happens. We know what it is. The definition is enshrined in international law. Under Article 2, which the report looks at, there are 5 acts of genocide, and it's really important to note that only one of them is mass killing. And despite this, the world continues to privilege the act of mass killing over other non-lethal genocidal acts. So typically when a genocide occurs, men are more likely to be victims of mass killing, while women are more likely to be victims of these non-lethal genocidal acts like rape or sexual torture. If we can look at the example of the Yazidis, where the boys and men were rounded up by ISIS and shot, while the girls and women were separated and distributed around the region to be slaves for ISIS soldiers. And so in this way, women are more likely to survive genocide. And so we hear what happened from them. And because of this, they are more likely to be viewed as witnesses rather than victims or survivors themselves. And the fact is that they are victims and survivors just as much as those who were killed. And it's also important to note that men are also victims of these non-lethal acts like rape and like forced sterilization. And so victims of these non-lethal acts very rarely see justice and accountability after genocide happens. And now perpetrators of genocide have an understanding of gender, whether they're cognizant of it or not. They target their victims based on their gender and based on their position in society. So women are targeted as mothers, as wives, as bearers of children who continue on the family line. Their bodies are specifically targeted for sexual violence in order to send a message to the men of their community of their powerlessness and their impotence. And we can look to the Bosnian War, where there was a policy of sexual violence against women. Rape was used as a weapon in the larger campaign of genocide. And the Serb forces actually set up rape camps where the whole purpose behind this was to forcibly impregnate Bosniak women. And these women were only released after it was too late to abort the fetus. Only once their wombs were physically occupied by the children of another group of people. That is genocide. That is causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. That is inflicting conditions of life calculated to bring about the physical destruction of the group. And that is imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. So without a full understanding of how gender interacts with genocide, the international community, and specifically the signatories to the Genocide Convention, will not be able to effectively do their duty under international law. And so to look at the situation of the Uyghurs, I first just want to highlight that many of the key testimonies upon which our report was based came from women whose family members were detained and women who were detained themselves. So we really couldn't have done this report without them. And I want to commend them for their bravery for speaking up, despite the very great risks that they face. And they do face very great risks because the Chinese government is engaging in a targeted and systematic campaign of genocidal violence against Uyghur women. So I'm going to briefly go over 3 genocidal acts happening in China right now, gendered genocidal acts that are not generally discussed within the larger discourse around genocide, but really deserve more attention and understanding. So first, as I said, the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, understands that Uyghur women are mothers and bearers of life. And so if their capacity to reproduce is somehow taken away, then their group will cease to exist. So women, specifically their sexual and reproductive organs, are always targeted in genocides. So inside and outside of the camps, Uyghur women are subjected to coercive birth prevention measures, including forced sterilizations, abortions, injections, and IUD placements. Under Article 2, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group is an act of genocide. So if you take this and apply it to the situation of the Uyghurs, as we did in the report, you can see that there is a policy of coercive birth prevention in Xinjiang. And it's not just happening to the women, the men are also being forcibly sterilized. In 2019 alone, $37 million was put into these programs with the intention of reducing birth rates in Xinjiang. And they succeeded. The birth rates dropped by 24% compared to the 4.2% nationwide. So the government is not killing these men and women, but they are destroying the chance for procreation so that each generation, the number of Uyghurs dwindles until there are no more left. Secondly, the CCP has implemented the Becoming Family program outside of the camps. This program pairs Han cadres with Uyghur families, usually families of detainees, in an effort to promote what they call ethnic harmony and unity. So the Uyghurs are forced to provide food, housing, entertainment to their Han family members. And then at the end of the day, they all sleep together in the same bed. So it will come as no surprise that there are many, many reports of the Han cadres raping and sexually assaulting Uyghur women as a part of this program. And lastly, Uyghur women are being increasingly sexualized by Chinese government propaganda in order to entice Han men into marrying them. So these types of inter-ethnic marriages are actually being incentivized. The government is offering things like cash rewards, preferential treatment towards employment, housing, and free education for the intermarried couples, their parents, and their children. Their children who will be considered and raised as Han Chinese, not Uyghur. So these are all small parts that come together to build the larger systematic campaign to break the Uyghur people and to destroy their group. These policies are diluting Uyghur progeny and destroying the regenerative capacity of the group. So when we look at this genocide, we need to look at the whole picture. We need to look at what is happening to the men, what is happening to the women, and why. And it is incredibly important that signatories to the Genocide Convention understand that as long as the intention is to destroy a protected group in part or in whole, these non-lethal acts, like rape, like forced sterilization, like incentivized interethnic marriages, constitute genocide just as much as mass killing. And so I will say again that we need to stop privileging the act of killing over other non-lethal genocidal acts. And until we do this, the international community will continue to fail in its duty to prevent and punish the crime of genocide. So I urge the signatories of the Genocide Convention to recognize this genocide, to recognize all of the gendered genocidal acts occurring, and to act. Thank you.